So it's time to elevate your design. I've seen so many designs created by AI, and it looks like the most generic things. And so, as someone who has created over 400 designs just from Aura alone, and you can see the breadth of the variety of the UI that I'm generating, I have so many tips for you. And we're going to go really deep into some of these tips, such as remixing, for example. And we're also going to be learning about the new design mode where you can edit the visual styles, the backgrounds, the gradients, and a lot of stuff that you can do. Then we're going to look into the resources, such as this amazing library called React Bits that has incredible particles and iridescence lights and stuff like that. We're going to look at different resources for UIs that can inspire for your next vibe coding project. And also animations using shaders, which is what Apple use a lot in their, latest iPhone, for example, when you use Siri. We're also going to learn about a little bit of coding, just enough to make you dangerous. So what do I mean by that? Well, HTML, right? Everyone should know HTML. And so we have Tailwind, which is the next generation of HTML. And you have a color system. And it's just to be familiar with that. So, we have the prompt builder that we've covered before. So if you haven't watched that video, you should definitely watch that before this. But now we're going to get into the nitty gritty and we're going to learn about spacing, about colors. And also for those who wants to have more control, they can export the design to Figma. And then we can also bring the design to coding apps such as Cursor or Lovable. All right, let's start with remixing, which is one of the most powerful things you can do. All of these platforms such as Aura and Lovable and V0, they have these templates, if you will, where you can essentially fork it or remix it. Sure, I would say some platforms have better choices than others. I would say Aura is definitely more focused on design, and that's what you want. You want to focus and vibe the styling, because once you have something, right? Once you have a style set in place, whether it's just a card or a little UI for your login, this is enough information for AI to take over. And if you ask another page or another component, it's gonna do it perfectly because it has that context is gonna be consistent with the UI. So the first thing that you want to do is to go to, for example, the browse page. And here you want to find a UI that you really like, right? And there's just so many of them. We have, beautiful landing pages and hero section. We also have, if you go to trending, for example, which is more recent. So if you come back to Aura, and thank you for that, you basically can see new designs every single week, every single day. So trending is, within the last 2-3 days, and the last week, for example, this one is really cool. And it has this beautiful shader in the background where it has, comets. And so you want to start with that, right? So for example, here, I'm going to remix this and I'm going to say adapt for a, portfolio, right? And then press enter, and it's just one prompt. And the thing that you want is to kind of like have as much context as possible so that you make as little mistakes. So the rule that I like to use is, 90% AI and 10% human. And the 10% is essentially just finding your taste, your vibe, right? And editing the last bit. So for example, the naming, the content. So here it's taking a little bit more time to show the preview. That's because it was focusing on the shader background first, right? And now it's generating using a live preview is generating the content, which is live. So as you can see here, it's focusing on the HTML. So you can see It's creating a portfolio landing page for Alex, and it doesn't have to be complete. And it's also based on a remix design, which means that it's going to respect sort of like the structure and the design of it. And it's doing a really good job. Now that you have your design, what do you do with it? You can, if you're not happy with it, you can find another template, another remix. And by the way, this is not the only way you can copy the HTML from any project as long as it provides the code. So, for example, when you open any of these templates, you're going to be able to see the code and you can remix it. So you can just use that as a template. And AI does a pretty good job, even if it's a different language, like React, for example, and converting it to HTML, it's going to do a good job. You can keep prompting it. So, for example, if you want, to add a footer, or you want to, you don't like this, you don't like that there's 3 cards instead of 2, you can keep prompting, and you can also do one thing that I love to do, which is to give a little bit more context to the style, if especially if I start from scratch. So, for example, a lot of people have trouble with starting from scratch, and let me tell you one secret here, which is you need to have the most context in the least amount of words possible. And the secret for me is to give context on my favorite site, like a reference site. Yes, we have the remix, but we can also, for example, create a portfolio in the style of your favorite site. And here, by the way, you're not stealing anything. AI does a really good job of kind of like giving reference. So, for example, you can mention Apple, you can mention Vercel, you can mention Linear, even like apps like React Bits. Maybe it's going to have a pretty good time thinking about. So, I like Linear because it gives. So the reason why I like Linear is because it's very specific as a style that I'm looking for, and AI is consistently very good at that. So, you can say something like create a portfolio in the style of Linear. Again, it can be any of your favorite site. And you're going to be experimenting with these. And depending on the industry, you're going to be referencing Apple, you're going to be referencing, Faye, or, a lot of these amazing websites. And you can see when you do that, and also Chatcien, which is very popular. And you can see as you do that, it already knows as a context, and it looks almost nothing like Linear in a way, but it does have context on sort of the minimalism and the typography and the the fonts that it's using and the spacing rules and kind of like a design system, if you will. And that's enough for you to get started on. And again, you can see it's very clean. And it's a lot better than if you just do it without referencing a style or referencing a website. So to me, that is one of the most important key. And at this point, you want to, to edit it, or you can say something like, I want in dark mode, and then you can keep prompting it and making it better. So this is the dark mode version, and what is funny about this, to be honest, this is a little bit of a side note, is that Linear, used to be very, very popular with this style of kind of like dark blue. And whenever you reference Linear in sort of like dark mode, it's going to use the old style of Linear. So if you look at the new style, which by the way is one of my favorite websites, and a lot of designers love this as a reference when they talk about good design. So they're doing something really special here, which is why, even if you do client work, if you talk to other designers and you reference some of these really well-designed apps, they're going to reference Linear a lot, or Apple a lot, right? They're like the shining example, and Stripe as well. So they're a shining example, and it's also good for AI to take these as sort of like a reference point. As you can see here, I'm pretty happy with this design. I look at this, I'm like, well, yeah, I can absolutely use this. I just need to fix, my name. I just need to maybe add a little bit of a cool animation. So which is where shader is going to come from, and animations is going to come from, and images and all that stuff. But the base of it, the foundation of it, the system of it is there. So now I want to show you design mode. So design mode is where you can basically go here and you're like, okay, I want this to be about me. So great. And I want to set maybe a different font. Maybe you want Geist instead. And maybe you want to have a tighter title to make it look a little bit more unique. So if you're using titles, you definitely should use tight or tighter. And this is, I see a lot of designers doing this a lot. So this is kind of funny. And then, obviously, if you don't like something, for example, I don't know, maybe you don't like this section. So we can just delete it. And then once you're done, you can just save it. And now we have a new version of it, which is amazing, right? So this is before and this is later. And this is really incredible. I can do the same thing with the other one that I did, which is, so now I'm going to go to my iterations. This is where I have a lot of these designs that I iterate, that I remix, such as this, beautiful, mobile design that I use from a remix again, and also the one that we just generated live. And, again, I'm going to apply the same thing. I'm going to go to design and I'm going to change to my name. And also I want maybe instead of bold, I want a light font, which is a little bit more modern. And maybe here I also want a little bit lighter. And so you do what you want and you remove the stuff that you want. And what is cool about this is that you don't need to waste like a new prompt just for like a really basic thing that you can do manually as a human in about 2 seconds and a better job. Because when you ask for these things, AI tends to make stupid mistakes. And of course, it makes sense, right? It's like asking someone else to do the work for you. They don't have all of that context in your brain. So you have to treat AI as if, it's just another person that might know everything about you. And you have to ask the person that question. And so, just keep that in mind. And that's why we have this beautiful tool. And then we can just save a new version. So now it's time to elevate your design, because yes, you can have a really minimalistic UI like this. Some of the small prompts that I like to use, of course, you can use the prompt builder, which is really good for animations, which is really good for changing the font and previewing everything. So for example, if you're not familiar with all of these fonts, it's really fun to kind of like look at the reference and the naming and what is possible, what is not possible, what is standard, all of these things. And it makes it so easy. But oftentimes, as you get more familiar and you kind of upgrade your skills, and for most designers, this is already known, right? It's already in their head. But of course, it's still good to see like, oh, what are the different possibilities of layout, or a bento layout, or split, or the framing and the different components that you can be building for your website. Because, believe it or not, a lot of seniors, designers and developers, especially developers, they still, Google about basic stuff like how to do an array, or how to do like a for loop and stuff. So it's funny. It's okay. We're human. We can't remember everything. So, and the same for me. I always Google about what are the colors of Tailwind, right? Because Tailwind colors, for example, and I forget, right? And also, this is a fairly new system, which is where if you have red, well, you have 50 to 950, so it's normal to keep going back to the basics. In fact, I love, as a practice, I love going back to just starting from scratch. To me, the ability to understand how to get from step A to step B to step C and Z, and you can see that in my practice, right? Like as someone who creates 439 designs, it's not someone who, spends a lot of time on a single, generation. I like to start from scratch, and I like to see, okay, how can I do better my prompt, and how can I edit better my prompt and my design. So this is totally normal. Of course, you also have projects where you're going to spend months, weeks, and days on, but also don't be afraid to start from scratch. If you create a React project or an AI prompt or a generation of a design or of a code, you should not be afraid to start over and do that as many times as possible. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So we have this one, and we're gonna go to also this one. So you want to have this, and now it's time to again elevate it using some sort of an animation. So we've learned, before how to animate it. You can just go to the prompt builder, and you can just reference something like different animations such as fade, slide, scale, and then you add that, and it's going to animate it. Now, I'm not going to do that now because I want to focus on the editing aspect, because usually I do the animation last. Just because the animation is kind of like something you add at the end. But for now, what I'm looking for is a background, something like this, something that can sort of make this website not so boring, because the last thing you want is to create a product or is to create a design that looks like everyone else's design. Right? It's like using a UI kit. The last thing you want is just to leave it as is, because the minute that someone else is using the same design and is sharing it, your product has already lost its luster, right? It's like a new car, it's like a new apartment. So do not underestimate this part. So what do we need here to make it more unique? Of course, we need animation. We're going to take care of that later, but we need some sort of a background. So if you look at my, of my profile again, something like a beautiful iridescent background like this could be really helpful. Of course, it depends on your choice. You can turn that background into the background of a hero section. You can also have this beautiful background that is put, instead of just a black right here, I'm using a shader. And again, I'm using a shader from React Bits, which is an amazing open source project, usually for React, but it also works for HTML and CSS. Again, you have to understand that every React project, ends up being HTML, CSS, and JavaScript anyways. It's just a compiling thing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the example. So we're going to go to showcase, not showcase, but the documentation. And here you have really beautiful examples of what you can do. And, it's absolutely incredible. It's interactive. It's one of the best design libraries that I've seen. Of course, we've seen many, last week, such as, Matter.js or, Particle.js. But this is just incredible. Look at this. Like, this is probably similar to Matter.js, but it's using words instead. And again, the open source community, we're all building on top of each other. This is a project with many contributors. And what we're going to look at is the background. So for example, I love this silk background. And, what you're going to do here is, yes, you can use it as a component, which is amazing. You can also customize like the speed, the scale, the intensity of the noise, which a lot of designers love to do. But what we want to do here is to use it in our project. So what we're going to do, we're going to copy the code here. And I'm going to show you one trick that I like to use, especially when it comes to shaders. So I'm going to do something like create background, shader background using 3.js. And this has a lot to do with the maturity of AI, right? So AI is still kind of mildly okay with 3D and shaders and all that stuff, but it is getting there. And keep in mind that this is not easy by any stretch of imagination. Any person who has coded shaders is not like, for me, I can't code a shader from scratch. So you can see it's building the shader, and you can see by the scripting here, this is the shader code. And there you go. If, from my experience, if you don't mention that this is a shader, and you're not mentioning 3GS, which is usually how you're going to be using shader in the context of, it's not going to give you the exact. So it's kind of like mentioning the technology that AI is supposed to use. If you don't mention those things, sometimes it's just going to say, I'm going to do this in CSS instead, right? Obviously, you can't do this in CSS. So that's why you have to mention these things, give more context. So it does have some of the, the options. It does not always happen this way, but it does, and you can, customize the colors and all that stuff. But the most important thing is that you have the code for it. Again, my goal is not to take credit for it. I'm not the one creating this. So if you're going to share this specifically, the background, you have to mention the credit to it. But if you're using it as a user to your portfolio, then yeah, you can put it in your footer or something like that. Especially if you share it online, then you can credit, the person who created, or the library, which is what I'm doing right now. So I want to make sure that they get the credit that they deserve for these amazing projects. So as I mentioned before, if you want this background specifically, now that we have it, we have the code, and we can just copy the code, and we can go back to, for example, this one. I'm not sure if it's going to work here, but I can go to the other project, like this one. Let's see where I can use it. So for example, I can say something like, in the hero section, use this shader background, and, hope for the best. It's not always going to work, but it should be working, and hopefully, and also we might have some color issues as well, because the background can influence sort of like how the colors is going to appear. But let's hope for the best. Let's see how it's going to go. And don't be afraid to start over. Don't be afraid to try different backgrounds. I have so many backgrounds that you can use in your project. If you go to my profile, again, most of these backgrounds is just me vibing to these backgrounds. So again, we have like this aurora, these iridescent colors. You also have the, these comets. You also have this, glow thing. This is me vibing for a lot of them. And, I've been using Shader Toy, for example, which is really good. I would say that it's, it's not always going to get exactly the result, which is fine. And you can have some really cool ones. It's taking a little bit, like, of course, this is a bit more 3D, but you can see that it's generating water. It's really, really cool. You can generate different backgrounds. You take this code, and again, don't forget to mention, create a shader background in 3GS. And also make sure that if you have multiple files, you're going to be doing, including the code for all of those things. But most of them have one file, so it's fairly easy. You can definitely try a bunch of them, and then you customize it, you change the colors, and that's really important. So back here, look at this. Look at how amazing, my portfolio website is looking with just 2 prompts. So I had this, right? It's kind of like a boring hero. And then now I have this. And believe me when I tell you, you share something like this online, or you share a product to your friends, it's going to elicit so much more reaction when it's more unique, when it has animations, when it's using something that nobody has seen before, or at least very few people have seen using this library, for example. And so you just need that one little ingredient, the special sauce to your design, and it's going to elevate it by so much more. All right, so now I want to talk about, editing it and how you can elevate, what you know about this. So as you know, like a lot of people nowadays use Tailwind. And the reason why we use Tailwind, you can go to the Tailwind website. They have the version 4 now, which is really awesome. The reason why is that it has a much more standardized system that is yielding better results in general. This is why, as a designer, I would use Tailwind instead, because if you use CSS, you have a hex color value. And so it can be millions of colors. But here, you have a very specific color system. You can press K and then you go to colors, and then you go here, and then you see the color system. This is a system that most designers nowadays use in Figma. And so you have multiple systems, but this is definitely one of the most popular ones because it works directly with code, which is also equally important for your system to work with code. Unless, of course, you're working for a company that has to be very specific in the design system, it's very unique. Most startup developers, vibe coders, new project founders will be using Tailwind. And try to memorize this. You don't need to memorize everything, but you just need to know the difference between 100 and 900. Usually 100 is for light mode, 900 is for dark mode. And of course, if you're talking about the background, but if you're talking about the text, then it's vice versa, black and white usually. But if you're using colors, it could be like 900 for the, you're using like 100 for the text and then 900 for the background. Again, you can switch back and forth between these, and you also have the more neutral colors, which is great for backgrounds that are not super vibrant. And the rule that I like to use is usually you want to use like 80% neutral or maybe 90% neutral and 10% color. And the color is usually focused for call to action and elements of attention, such as a photo or such as an animation. But oftentimes, this is great enough. And, yes, the background is colored, but it also is not too distracting. And I can definitely read the text really well. And it's just something that you get to know over time to build your taste as a designer, as a developer. And everyone has to do that. In the era of AI, this is one of the defining factor of anyone, whether you're a coder or a marketeer or someone like a founder. You have to build your taste. You have to know what looks good, what doesn't look good. And this is a skill that that is relevant for everyone. Like I said, what looks good, what doesn't look good, what font that should be better serve for your project, what kind of logo, what kind of contrast. So these things that you can learn over time, and with practice, you're going to get better. The other thing that I want to mention, you should definitely get familiar with the spacing system. Usually it's the 4-point grid or the 8-point grid. In this case, for Tailwind, it is a 4-point grid. And so when you use 1 is equal to 4 pixels. And the reason why we're using this is because, we want to avoid as much as possible to use a number like 25, which is not divisible either by 2 or by 4 or by 8. And so we are kind of using these numbers because they're the industry standards. So for example, if you look at the iPhone, the padding of the content is usually 16. And also it grows depending on the size of the device. So the bigger the size, such as desktop, it can grow to 32 or 40. And if it's mobile, it can go to maybe 12. But usually in the middle is like 20. And so that's why we use a spacing system like this one. So you have to be aware of like 1 is equal to 4, which means that when you go and edit your design and you're going to be like, oh, I want to add the bottom padding. So 6 is not actually 6 pixels, it's actually 30 pixels. So now, I want to use 8 or I want to use 12. And by doing this, you have a better sense of spacing and also a better standard amount of spacing, because you don't want to use 1 pixel, right? Because then it doesn't look good and you're not following a system. You're not following a grid. And a lot of designers use grid. And so this is the best way to work with some, with you kind of like a more organic way to use grid. and is to use this kind of like point system. So to be aware of the color system. So if I change the color, for example, of this button right here, and I change the background color, see, you see that these colors, instead of me giving you like a custom color and you have to enter like a very specific hex color value, I give you a system which is Tailwind, and it's amazing, right? So you can see from 100 to 900, well, 50 to 950, and I can change the color, and I have these beautiful colors because yes, there are really bad colors in the millions of colors that you can use. So it's good to have like a sense of, what is light, what is dark, what is middle. Usually the middle is the vibrant color that you use for buttons. And usually the light colors are more for neutral tones. But if you're using neutral tone, you want to use like slate, gray, zinc, these things that you're going to be learning over time. And then you have the opacity, but also you have the gradient, which is really cool. So this is built in. As you can see, this is a tool created for designers, and I just launched it this week on a Tuesday, and you can see you have these gradients that are preset. You can set the direction of the gradient. You can also customize the colors of the gradient. And so, maybe I just want blue and I want this to be kind of like, this orientation. And also I want to show you. So I'm going to go to and save this first, right? I kind of like the bluish gradient here. And I'm going to go to this project right here. I'm going to go to design mode. And here I can click on the body. I can change the background, and I can set, a gradient. So it's going to have more contrast, going to be able to see a little bit better what's going on. And I want to show you something really cool that no other design tool is using. And so I'm going to select the phone, right? You can see here, I'm selecting the phone. Hopefully I'm selecting the right layer. And then I'm going to scroll down, and here we have transform, which is so cool. So look at that. I can use Q and, X and Y, and I'm creating like a 3D perspective of that markup. Now, I cannot mix skew and 3D, so I'm going to also show you the actual 3D. And by the way, this is all Tailwind, right? This is all CSS. Tailwind, by extension, is just CSS, but in a more standardized way. So if you know HTML and CSS, this is going to be amazing. And now I'm going to use 3D rotate. Look at that. It's so cool. And I can also rotate Z, and I can also set the perspective. Usually the perspective, though, you have to apply it to the parent container. That's usually how you do it. But you can see it's so cool that I'm able to create this 3D perspective, and I can use scale. And now I'm going to click on the container, which is the body, and I'm going to set the perspective. Look at that, right? If you have 100, it looks like a 3D thing. But if you have like 300, 500, then it looks a little bit more, normal, not fish eye. So this is more like fish eye. And so I'm going to go with this one. And there you go. We have this amazing background. So I can do it to this one as well. You can just apply skew, or you can just apply 3D. But I'm going to use skew. And this also can be useful to show your app. So if you have a hero section with a mobile next to it, so for example, I can go to my profile, and here I can find one of the hero section where there's a mobile app with it, and I can remix it. So for example, this one is pretty cool, and you can see I can be playing perspective on it. I can also be playing perspective on cards. So for example, let me show you a pretty good one. Like this is a good card. This is also a good card. This is also a good card that you can use perspective on. It's very good to play with it and to create beautiful, beautiful mockups that you can also be using in your hero section. So something like this or like this. And yeah, play with all of this. You also have the ability to use grayscale, for example. This is useful for colors and stuff like that. And you can also use inverting, which is kind of cool. So yeah, give it a try. And finally, I want to show you the code mode, which I just launched yesterday. And look at this. This is so cool. And I'm gonna make this a bit smaller because we don't have a ton of space. I'm gonna make this at 75% or maybe 60%. And yeah, this is using a library, a React library called Monaco Editor. And it's essentially VS Code. And you can edit every single thing. Now, I want to show you a really cool feature that we came up with. And I decided to implement it yesterday. And then we were like, okay, what if you can just click on one of the element and it's going to show you which part of the code it is. And boom, there you go. You click on it and then you can just change it directly here in the code. So welcome, and it's live. How amazing that is. But also you can, change the Tailwind code. You can change everything you want. You can add code. It has indentation and everything. It's so cool. And you can see I can make it bigger if I know code, which I recommend that you do. And so let me just go back to the code that we just added using design mode. So you can see here, this is AI basically doing the comments, by the way. This is not me. But when we go to the design mode, we also edit the code, right? Using the design. But here we're using the code. So you can see that the clay is using grayscale. So now I can just remove this. And boom, we have no more grayscale. And I can also remove invert. And there you go. And once you're done, you can also obviously change the text. So new text. And I can save it. Boom, we have a new version. I can view it. And there you go. We have the edits in the code. And how awesome this is. This is also better because yes, the design mode can be, it's a design, right? Like it's a UI. You can do a lot of things. This is great for beginners. If you're someone who's never done code before, this is perfect for you. It's so super easy. You just need to know sort of like the spacing values and the colors, which really helps. But also you can have custom colors. It still needs someone who's more like a designer. So if you're a designer, you definitely will be very, very comfortable here. But if you know a little bit of HTML and CSS, and by the way, this is just HTML and CSS. There's nothing special about the code here, which is awesome because like it's not React, so you don't need to know all of these includes and functions and all that stuff. This is just CSS, right? You can see sometimes we do use CSS, but oftentimes we use Tailwind. So as I mentioned before, I click here, I can change all the styling here, which is amazing because then I don't have to go back and forth. And when I reference the element, I can just change the whole thing from here, which is much more friendly rather than having to go here and I don't know where the code might be. Although it does reference the style names. So for example, these are Tailwind, but sometimes it does use, for example, a custom class like maybe float animation, if I'm not mistaken, is a custom class, which is right here in the CSS. So it is applying the animation and therefore you can customize in the CSS. So this is code mode. Again, we're going to cover much more deeply in the next video, but I just wanted to show you that, especially for developers and designers who code, this is just incredibly useful. I can't stress enough how useful this is, and it's going to give you superpowers to how much you can do with your design without necessarily having to ask AI to do every little thing for you. And also AI is not perfect. Again, it's like a person that, doesn't have all of this context and you're asking for specific things that you yourself can do much faster if you know a little bit of code and a little bit of design. Now, the last thing I want to show you is, being able to export to Figma, which is something that I actually spent quite a lot of time working on the script to make it export to Figma. It's definitely not perfect, but it does most of the work and you can just customize all the elements. Now for super simple design, such as this one, for example, it's going to be very easy for this to work. So we're going to export copy Figma code, and then you're gonna go to Figma, and you're gonna be opening the console. So you can just command / and search for console, and you're gonna open it. So the console is essentially for for debuggers like developers. So, and also you have the console, which is also really good for, like, if you're creating a plugin, this is really useful for testing commands of the plugins API, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be running a plugins code. And in this case, for the first time, you're going to need to say allow pasting so that you can paste stuff, code into it. And then finally, you can just paste the entire code here, and voila, this is your design. It's generating. It has many, many layers, about 30,000 lines of code, to be honest. And it does a really good job, you know, especially for super simple design like this one. As you can see, everything is there. It's absolutely incredible. By the way, if you do get an error about, the code not running, you might need to start a new document. I think this is probably a temporary bug on Figma's part. And it's not my code from Aura. It's just Figma plugin API that is not running in the console. But anyways, this is working. You can see we have all the layers. We have some auto layout. I haven't figured out a way to get 100% auto layout or even variable, something that I might work in the future. But a lot of people ask me, why would you want to bring it back to Figma? Well, the reason why is because a lot of people have an existing design system. If you want to work for a big company, you have a design system. You don't generate your final code from Aura or Lovable. You actually, you actually kind of like bring it back to a system first, and then you edit it. So this makes the work so much easier. Now, Aura is not the only way. You can also just go to one of the plugins. There's one that is really, really popular called html.to.design. It is a paid app, but you're going to be able to use this plugin, which is very, very, like, it's even better than the one that I have created. But you can go to editor, and it's like it has auto layout and everything. And then you paste the HTML code that we're going to get from Aura. So again, you can go to Aura and you can copy the HTML, you bring that to Figma, and it's going to create the, all the layers for you. html.to.design, highly recommend, is the most accurate way to get all the layers in the auto layout from the HTML to your Figma system and designs and whatnot. It's absolutely incredible. Now, so you have this, I'm going to open this again. You have this beautiful portfolio that we just did live today, and you want to know, how can I turn this into a real website? Obviously, you can share it, right? If you share it, it's just a custom link, but most people, they want to have their own custom domain name and all that stuff. So at the end of the day, all you need to do is to copy the code, right? And then you're going to go to something like Lovable or V0, and you're going to be like, pasting the code, and that's it. And I could have said something like create a website from this, and then it's going to generate it. And from here, you can publish it. You can set up your domain name and whatnot. And there you go. You have your portfolio. You want to ask. You want to change. You want to customize. But what is cool is that you change everything that you want, like the text, the marketing, the images. Maybe not the images, because we haven't worked that part yet, but definitely like the base template should be there. And from here, it's fairly easy to take it to the full-blown website or app that you're building. And there you go. We have the website. It's generating exactly what we had in Aura, and now you can just keep asking stuff, and it keep pushing the code, publish it online. And keep in mind that the first time you're going to be setting up your website, it might take like 2, 5, 10 minutes because it's generating a lot of files. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.